You. Alrighty, friends. So on Wednesdays in the Spokane Sangha, in the Spokane community of Recovery Dharma, we take kind of a Zen practice. And we've been reading a book written by a Zen master. Her name is Roshi Joan Halifax. She's the abbess of the Upaya Institute in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She's in her 80s now, and she is energetic and go-getting, and she's an intellectual. She is part of the socially engaged Buddhist movement here in the West, particularly in the United States. She's amazing. And she wrote this wonderful book called Standing at the Edge. And the underneath it reads, Finding freedom finding freedom where fear and courage meet. Finding freedom where fear and courage meet. Roshi talks about an edge state in a way that I really like. And so as we begin our practice today, I'm going to introduce to you what this edge state is, particularly for anyone who's hearing about it for the first time, but also as a way of repetition and hearing things again to bring things clearer. So I'd like to go ahead and start, and my chime is over there, so we're not going to worry about the chime. We'll just hear I have a bell. Look at that. I have a bell. We'll invite the bell to ring, and just as a little bell of mindfulness to bring us here fully. Welcome everyone to Recovery Dharma. I'm Julia. I'm one of the facilitators in the Spokane Sangha. It's my pleasure to be here today. Before we get into the book, Standing at the Edge, we're going to talk a little bit about what an edge state is. And it is that place of fear and courage, where they come together, where they sister one another. So an edge state is a place of immense fertility and growth. And when we go over the edge, as we will, that's just the nature of being human, we will go over the edge, we will overextend ourselves, we will become distressed, experience anxiety and worry. Sometimes situations and conditions in life propel us over the edge a little bit. And rather than beat ourselves up for having gone over the edge, that too is a place of learning, a place of growth, a place to access wisdom. And then we bring ourselves back to an edge state. At the same time, we can experience life and go through life never getting close to that edge, never, ever challenging ourselves, testing our courage, really getting, standing before our fear, getting to know that fear. And so by staying away from that edge, we become complacent, apathetic, lazy. And this is a place where habit energy can take hold. We don't want to be scared. We don't want to have all those feelings, so we don't challenge ourselves and we stay away from that edge. But as Roshi teaches in this book, if we don't stand before our fear, if we don't have any curiosity about it, we never have the opportunity to cultivate courage, to test those limits, and we never have the opportunity to learn when those limits have been extended. So the edge state is this really rich place for our maturity, our empowerment, our clarity. And today we're going to bring forward a brand new chapter all about compassion, which is what we are exploring this week as part of our month-long exploration of the 4 limitless qualities in Buddhism: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. These 4 limitless qualities that we all have the capacity to cultivate are interconnected. Where there is true joy, there is also loving kindness, compassion, and equanimity, which is the spaciousness we have to accept the positive and negatives in our lives. When we practice loving kindness in its truest, most sincere form, there's joy to be had. There's self-compassion. And there's strength in our willingness to look at our qualities that we're really proud of and look at our qualities that make us cringe. Because to be a whole human being, we have both. And part of the equanimous practice is to stop trying to get rid of all of those shadowed aspects for us and instead fold them into our being. Allow their presence to teach us, to open us, to awaken to the reality of life. Yesterday, the Spokane Sangha was so privileged to hear from many people sharing how the meditation that our facilitator Marty brought forward empowered them and inspired them to engage self-compassion. With those revelations was an awareness of our propensity to be really harsh toward ourselves, negative, hyper-fixated on the shadows, maybe even shy to bring forward all of our magnificent qualities, maybe embarrassed to add a brighter light to the things that make us brilliant, and there are many for each of us. Today, we're going to talk about compassion. The word calm means with, the word passion is to suffer. Compassion is our capacity to be with suffering, whether it is in another sentient being or ourselves. And when we practice compassion, not only are we exploring our capacity to be with the conditions that create misery and despair, confusion and ignorance, but we're also looking at ways that we can create conditions for its ease, for clarity, for loving kindness and joy. Compassion is a deep, heart-led desire to ease and alleviate the misery in others, including ourselves. And there are many, many ways to do that. This is what Roshi has to say about it. She writes, "When we're at the edge, in danger of falling over the precipice into suffering, compassion is the most powerful means I know for keeping our feet firmly planted on the earth and our hearts wide open. When I heard the Nepalese girl's cries as her burns were being cleaned, compassion helped me stay grounded in empathy and navigate away from empathetic distress. When I have confronted the systemic violence of war, racism, sexism, and environmental degradation, compassion has reminded me of my values, helping me to act from a place of integrity rather than getting mired in chronic moral outrage. During my years of sitting with dying people and volunteering in a maximum security prison, compassion kept me from burning out. Compassion has been my greatest ally in the hardest of times. Not only has my life been strengthened by compassion, but those whom I have served may have benefited as well. I have also been the recipient of compassion. My life has been profoundly affected by times when others have shown me great kindness. Many years ago, I was lying on a hospital bed waiting for surgery, shivering with fear. A Buddhist friend sat with me. As the team arrived to take me into the operating room, my friend squeezed my hand and with a steady gaze said, "Remember who you really are. Remember who you really are." His touch, his words sent a wave of relief through me, and I dropped into a place that was larger than my dread of surgery, vaster than my fear of death. When, like my friend, we offer compassion, it burns forth from our hearts like a comet. This is the spirit of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, who hears the cries of the world and responds with a boundless heart, one that does not sink like a heavy stone in the waters of suffering, but is broken open like a geode to the rare space within, glittering with light for those who are struggling in darkness. For decades, I have traveled the geographies of compassion, exploring its structure and the deeper processes at play in this powerful landscape. I've examined scientific studies on compassion, received teachings from Buddhist teachers, shared stories with caregivers, sat with prisoners and dying people, trained educators and business people in approaches to compassion, and used my meditation practice as a medium of investigation. And then there are the challenges that life has given me, the perils that have also been ripe with possibility. Compassion is defined as feeling genuine concern about the suffering of another and desiring to improve the one's welfare. Compassion also helps us meet our own suffering and that of others with an appropriate response. And remarkably, compassion is the path out of the toxic aspects of the edge states, pathological altruism, empathetic distress, moral suffering, disrespect, burnout. Why? Because compassion calls forth our best human capacities, attentional balance and caring, unselfish intention and insight, and ethical action in a way that no other response does. The practice and cultivation of compassion is lifelong. For the month of July, we're going to touch upon it over the course of a week. We're barely going to scratch its beautiful surface. So for today, I simply want to encourage you to receive these beautiful words and wisdom of what compassion is and turn it inward toward yourself. And over the next couple of days, we're going to practice bringing forward a compassionate response to that inner critic, that inner voice that's so quick to be harsh and judgmental, so quick to be berating and spiritually depleting. And one of the things that we're going to do with gentleness and with compassion is create space for what our inner critic is saying to maybe be true. Here's one of my favorite examples for myself. I have a voice in my head that has lived with me since I was a very little kid. Probably since first grade is my first real memory of this voice coming forward. And this voice never fails to remind me, Julia, you talk too much. It's totally true. And ouch. True, I do. And the thing is, as I've come to that edge state, as I've been learning how to treat myself with compassion, I don't have to try to diminish that voice and say, no, I don't talk too much, and get all defensive. Instead, I can go, yeah, that's true. And it's not the whole truth. And that's the compassionate response part. This negative thing you're saying about me might be true. And it's definitely not the whole truth, because I also know how to be silent. I also know how to be a good listener. And I also think sometimes what I have to say is of benefit. So sometimes when that voice comes up and it really activates insecurity and doubt in me, my compassionate response to it, hey, Julia, God, you talk so much. I know, it's true. And sometimes what I have to say is good. So that little mantra, that's true, and not the whole truth, is so key to a compassionate way of being. And the reason is because it softens our defenses. It allows us to be vulnerable and strong. It allows us our insecurities and our confidence. It allows us to be at that edge state where fear and courage meet. And when I have this opportunity to practice honestly toward myself, I don't have to feel bad about the times that I talk too much, and I can look at when I'm unskillful. There's something to learn about that. Sometimes I talk too much when I get nervous or when I'm insecure. I think that's very human. That's one way I cope. It's not always adaptive. It's not always skillful. Okay. And I'm going to learn from that. And I'll gently encourage myself to observe. Hey, Julia. Let's slow down. Let's listen. And lo and behold, my tension eases, my insecurity eases, my discomfort eases, and I start to feel a little okay, maybe a little peace, maybe a little joy. This is the action of compassion. I think that's it. Let's go ahead and end our practice with a dedication of merit. And what I'd like to share with you today is it's the very last verse of kind of a blessing, I think. It's one of Shantideva's most profound teachings of the way of the Bodhisattva. So Shantideva was an 8th century monk and philosopher at Nalanda University in India. And he was a rebel. He was a total rebel. This guy shows up at this university of all these scholars who are debating and they're talking Buddhism and they're trying to get enlightened and all that good stuff. And Shantideva's like, never goes to class, never shows up, never participates. And people are like, God, who is this guy? So in their, best Buddhist practice, they call him up and call him out, trying to humiliate them because they're such good Buddhists, right? And just the irony of it. Here are these people in a Buddhist university, and their goal is to humiliate the person that they just can't understand, don't understand, just are furious at. So they call him up, and they're just ready to humiliate and embarrass him. And he asks them very boldly, do you want me to regurgitate what you all are talking about, or do you want me to share with you something new? And they're like, oh yeah, let's share something new. Because what could you possibly know, dude, that doesn't come to class? So Shantideva sits there, breathes a moment, and then proceeds to share with the audience the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva. to bring forward compassion to the world, something they had never heard before. He did that from his own mind, his own good heart, the nature of his bodhicitta. Each of us possesses that capacity. That's the wonder and the beauty of being human. Shantideva says, as long as space remains, as long as living beings remain, may I too remain to dispel the misery of the world. Being here today certainly lightens my load and brings great joy to me. Thank you so much for your brilliant practice today. Have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon and morning. Have a wonderful day, friends. We'll see you later. Bye-bye. Namaste.